In the autumn of 1781, the most powerful empire on Earth believed victory was only a matter of time. For 6 long years, Britain had fought to crush the American Revolution. Its army was experienced, its navy ruled the oceans, and its commanders were confident that the rebellion would eventually collapse under the weight of British military strength. But while British leaders focused on winning battles, a different kind of war was unfolding. It was a war of deception, a war of patience, a war in which a single brilliant strategy would change the course of history forever. The man behind that strategy was General George Washington. By 1781, the war had reached a dangerous stalemate. Neither side could deliver the decisive blow needed to end the conflict. British forces occupied major cities, while the Continental Army struggled with shortages of food, ammunition, and supplies. Many soldiers had endured years of hardship, marching through bitter winters and surviving on little more than determination. To British commanders, Washington appeared trapped. From their perspective, he lacked the strength to launch a major offensive. His army seemed exhausted, outnumbered, and incapable of defeating Britain's professional troops in open battle. That assumption would become one of the greatest mistakes of the entire war. Washington understood something his opponents did not. Winning the war did not require defeating every British army. It required defeating the right army. Far to the south, Lieutenant General
Lord Charles Cornwallis had established his forces at Yorktown, Virginia. Confident in the strength of the British Navy, Cornwallis believed his position was secure. Supplies and reinforcements could arrive by sea whenever they were needed. On paper, his decision seemed logical. In reality, it placed his army directly in the path of one of history's most carefully coordinated military operations. Washington had begun planning something extraordinary. Instead of attacking where Britain expected, he would convince the enemy that New York remained his primary objective. Every movement, every campfire, every message, and every visible preparation would reinforce that illusion. The British would watch Washington's army closely, yet they would never realize they were looking in the wrong direction. While attention remained fixed on New York, thousands of Continental and French soldiers quietly prepared for a march that would decide the future of a nation. The trap had already begun to close, and Britain still had no idea it was walking straight into it.
As summer drew to a close, Washington carefully put his plan into motion. Around New York, American troops built new camps, strengthened fortifications, and increased visible military activity. Scouts reported unusual movements, while false intelligence was deliberately allowed to reach British commanders. Everything pointed toward an attack on New York. British General Sir Henry Clinton believed Washington was preparing for a massive assault against the city. Every report seemed to confirm his suspicions. It was exactly what Washington wanted him to believe. Then, under the cover of secrecy, the Continental Army began to move. Instead of marching north, thousands of American and French soldiers quietly turned south. Roads filled with columns of infantry, cavalry, artillery, and supply wagons stretching for miles. To local civilians, it looked like another routine military movement. Few realized they were witnessing one of the most important marches in American history. Discipline became essential. Soldiers were ordered to avoid discussing their destination. Officers carefully controlled information, ensuring that even many within the army knew only what they needed to know. Meanwhile, Britain's greatest advantage still appeared untouchable. The Royal Navy dominated the Atlantic Ocean.
For decades, its powerful fleets had protected British armies and transported reinforcements wherever they were needed.
Cornwallis trusted that naval superiority would guarantee his safety at Yorktown. But across the Atlantic, another force was already sailing toward the American coast. The French fleet, commanded by Admiral Francois-Joseph Paul, Comte de Grasse, had left the Caribbean with a single objective: reach the Chesapeake Bay before the British. Every mile became a race against time. If the French arrived first, Cornwallis could be trapped. If the British fleet arrived first, Washington's entire strategy might collapse before the final battle even began. As Washington's army continued its exhausting march through heat, dust, and rough terrain, no one could be certain how the naval race would end. Weeks of planning now depended on events unfolding hundreds of kilometers away at sea. History itself seemed balanced on a single question: who would reach the Chesapeake first?
In early September of 1781, the fate of the campaign shifted to the waters of the Chesapeake Bay. The French fleet arrived first. More than 20 ships of the line sailed into the bay, sealing one of the most important waterways in North America. Their mission was simple but critical: prevent the Royal Navy from reaching Cornwallis. For Britain, losing control of the Chesapeake, even briefly, could prove disastrous. News of the French arrival spread quickly. The Royal Navy immediately sailed south to challenge them, determined to reopen the bay and rescue the trapped British army. The two fleets met off the Virginia coast. For hours, massive warships exchanged thunderous broadsides. Dense clouds of smoke drifted across the sea as cannon fire echoed over the water. Masts splintered, sails were torn apart, and experienced sailors fought to keep their ships in formation. Neither fleet completely destroyed the other. But victory is not always measured by the number of ships sunk. When the battle ended, the British fleet withdrew from the Chesapeake. The French remained in control. That single outcome changed everything. Cornwallis had counted on supplies, reinforcements, and, if necessary, evacuation by sea. Now, those options would disappear. The ocean, once Britain's greatest strength, had suddenly become a barrier. At the same time, Washington's army completed its remarkable march south. Thousands of Continental soldiers joined forces with nearly equal numbers of French troops.
Together, they surrounded Yorktown with an army unlike anything Britain had expected. Only then did Cornwallis begin to understand the danger. This was not a raid. This was not a diversion. It was a carefully prepared siege. Day by day, Allied engineers dug long trenches closer to the British defenses. Heavy artillery rolled into position under cover of darkness. Every cannon was carefully placed to maximize its effect. Soon, the silence was broken. The first Allied guns opened fire. Shells crashed into British fortifications. Buildings collapsed beneath the relentless bombardment. Defensive positions that had taken weeks to build began to crumble in only a few days. Inside Yorktown, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Food became scarce. Medical supplies ran low. Exhausted soldiers worked through the night repairing damaged defenses, only to watch them collapse again under another wave of cannon fire. The trap was now complete. Cornwallis had been surrounded on land and sealed off at sea. For the first time in the campaign, even Britain's most experienced commanders began to wonder whether escape was still possible.
With every passing day, the Allied siege grew stronger. American and French engineers worked tirelessly, digging new trenches ever closer to the British lines. Under the cover of darkness, hundreds of soldiers hauled massive bronze cannons through the mud, placing them within devastating range of Yorktown. By sunrise, the bombardment resumed with even greater intensity. Explosions echoed across the town as cannonballs smashed into walls, shattered gun positions, and sent clouds of earth high into the air. British artillery answered whenever it could, but each passing hour weakened their defenses. Cornwallis knew time was running out. If he stayed where he was, the siege would slowly destroy his army. If he attacked, he would face a larger force waiting outside the town. There was only one remaining option: escape. On the night of October 16th, under the cover of darkness, British soldiers quietly gathered along the York River. Small boats waited at the shoreline, ready to ferry the army across the water before the Allies realized what was happening. For a brief moment, the plan seemed possible. The first boat slipped silently into the river. Oars cut through the calm water as soldiers crossed without making a sound. Then, everything changed. Dark clouds rolled across the sky. Powerful winds swept over the river. Within minutes, a violent storm erupted. Heavy rain lashed the boats as waves tossed them from side to side. Some vessels drifted far off course. Others struggled simply to stay afloat. Officers shouted orders that vanished into the howling wind.
The carefully planned escape collapsed before it had truly begun. By dawn, exhausted British soldiers were forced back into Yorktown. Their final chance had disappeared. Washington immediately recognized what the failed escape meant. The trap was now impossible to break. Allied engineers pushed the siege even closer, completing a second line of trenches. Heavy artillery rolled forward once again, bringing hundreds of additional guns within range of the British defenses. The bombardment became relentless. Entire sections of the fortifications crumbled under constant fire. To make matters worse, two advanced British redoubts, critical defensive positions protecting Yorktown, had to be captured before the siege could reach its final stage. Washington gave the order. Under the cover of night, carefully selected American and French assault troops fixed bayonets and advanced toward the enemy fortifications. No shots were fired. Silence became their greatest weapon. Within minutes, the redoubts were overrun in fierce hand-to-hand fighting. As dawn broke, Allied flags flew above the captured positions. The British defensive line had been broken. From that moment forward, Cornwallis understood the truth. Yorktown could no longer be defended.
Inside British headquarters, the mood had changed completely. The confident officers who had once believed victory was certain now faced an impossible reality. Reports arrived one after another, each carrying worse news than the last. Ammunition was running low. Defensive positions had collapsed. Thousands of Allied soldiers surrounded the town, while powerful French warships still controlled the Chesapeake Bay. There would be no rescue. There would be no breakthrough. And there would be no escape. Cornwallis gathered his senior officers for one final council. Every possible option was considered, but each led to the same conclusion. The army could fight on for a few more days, but it could no longer win. On the morning of October 17th,